Hello, everybody. I am so excited. Welcome to our Something to Chew On talk show. I'm Christine Fraser. I am your host. I am the founder of Inner Glow Getter. And I'm so excited. We have a live studio audience with us. For those of you in the audience, I want to see some claps. You actually have the ability to do clapping, waving, some little emojis. We love to see that to keep this active. Yay! Thank you for that because it's fun to see all of you that showed up live today to have this chat with Miss Tara. I am over the moon excited because I have been helping women for the past, over 10 years in helping them overcome just their issues around food and healing. And I have really found that so much of our relationship with food really translates into our relationships with humans, with people. And this topic is near and dear to my heart because it's something that I have experienced and gone through. And I understand that many of you might have been through some sort of relationships around narcissism, or have exes or partners, or anybody in your life that might be exhibiting signs of narcissism. It can be very soul-sucking journey. And today we have Tara Daylami is a clinical psychotherapist. She's been working in the industry for over 20 years. She has personally helped me overcome so much more beyond even my things around relationships. She understands the energetics of being human and how to really move through things that you may see as difficulties and really align with your higher self and get into this version of yourself that is just waiting to be seen and heard and come alive, and has personally helped me through so much of my own journey. I like to call her my fairy godmother, and she's quite amazing. So I'm really excited. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. You can type your questions in the chat as well. And we're going to get onto the topic and really help you understand what narcissistic abuse really is, and some tools and tricks to help you. I wouldn't even say tricks. We're just going to talk about some really profound things. And I want to give you a side note that some things might be a really profound shift for you. And that's the whole point of this conversation. So let us welcome Miss Tara. Let me just get to my timeline here. I think I go right to this one to get you on here live with me. There you are. Hi.
Hi.
So welcome. I'm so excited to have you. I miss you too. So it's nice to see you.
I know. I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
Platform. Is there a way to see both of us, for me to see you as well?
Oh, do you not see me?
No.
That's very interesting.
No,
it will probably come when we come to the next question.
Perfect.
Because I'm just going through the timeline. I can see you and me, but it's in the speaker intro, and we'll get right into our first question, and then that will probably get you where you see me.
Okay.
So let's start. I really want to start with just the question, and I want the real Tara answer of what even is a narcissist. I know we have a lot of women on the call that some of them are in current relationships with someone they consider a narcissist, and I'm just curious your thoughts after working with so many people through this. Yeah. What would you even define a narcissist as?
Okay, so you said the real Tara answer, right?
Yes.
May I just give a preface before we really get into it?
Okay. Absolutely.
Thank you, because I feel like it's really important with this topic to anyone listening live or to the recording that a lot of what is about to come out of my mouth is not necessarily applicable to you if you are literally in danger. This is not that conversation about how to get yourself out of physical danger. If you're in the situation, your only objective really right now needs to be to get out. And I know that is so much easier said than done, but I want to preface it by saying that because, information and education and tools all have levels and layers to them. It's one of my favorite things to say. I'll probably say it 20 times in this conversation. There are levels, and within those levels, there are also layers. Everything depends on where you stand in relationship to the thing that's being talked about or discussed, or to the situation, or where you are specifically in your experience of this type of relationship dynamic that really matters. So I don't want anyone to use what I'm saying today as an excuse to gaslight yourself, because that's a real thing, or to think that you're messed up or you're doing something wrong. Just recognize that those are all still just the wounded aspects talking. Okay, fair?
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, amazing.
Because I know how it is when you're in that place. It's just like quicksand. And that's not the
Yes.
intention of this conversation. It's not to make you bad or wrong. And also, really, if you ever feel that way, of course, make sure that it's not because you're in some story, but also if you consistently feel bad listening to somebody talk, you should stop listening to them. Because you're not supposed to feel that way when you're getting help or education or resources or tools. Okay.
And I think that's one of my favorite things about you is the wisdom I've gotten from Tara over the years has literally been a complete 180 mind shift. And I still do consider myself an intelligent person, but there is these layers. And if you open yourself to your consciousness and understanding the layers and the interconnectedness of everything, it's so beautiful. But with that being said, I find you so powerful in your ability with that wisdom that you hold, because I've scratched the surface of the wisdom that you hold, and your ability to still hold this level of such deep compassion for people no matter where they're at is really, really beautiful. I just wanted to mention that too, because sometimes you can almost, and I think sometimes we see each other once you've overcome something is like, oh my gosh, how can you think this way?
First of all, thank you. Like, deeply received. I felt that with every cell of my being, and I really do receive that. And I really have come to believe that it isn't really wisdom if it doesn't contain compassion, because that person is still, and it's okay, right? Because you just have to be where you are. There's nothing wrong with any of it. Okay. Like, literally, there's no, this, kind of instinct that we have to want to categorize things. And it's because of our own wounding. Now, that being said, what's not for you is not for you. And yeah, you should move away from that which is not for you. And because you know how you feel. And thank you again, Kristen. I really appreciate that. And yes, I'm obviously a highly intelligent person.
Yes.
So the narcissist, yeah? Okay, so I'm just going to start with essentially not giving a lot of people what they probably want to hear. And the reason for that is because, yes, I can rattle off the things, right? Somebody who's very entitled, somebody who really only considers themselves, lacking empathy, in the more severe cases, they're outright exploitative. So there's a difference between somebody who's just really grandiose and like just really, really proud of themselves versus somebody, and maybe even somebody who doesn't, have a ton of empathy, or somebody who is really into status and like will only hang out with people that they consider to be high status. These are all narcissistic qualities, but still, somebody who's literally willing to step on someone to get what they want, that's a more severe, trait. And I say that because, pros and cons tallies don't work when it comes to this. It's like, well, they've got 8 of the, don't get caught up in that. And so, yeah, there are these defining features, but what I've come to believe, and really what comes to me when I think of like, oh, the narcissist, truthfully, I think, oh, my greatest teacher, because and I wish there were only one. It has been multiple for me, and they have been my greatest teachers in so many ways, because they're essentially, when you distill it down to its core, the narcissist is a reflection of where we have work to do. Again, not punitive. Don't go doing that. Like, catch yourself if you find yourself going there, because that's just wound activation. They're not a reflection because you're like them. Not that
beautiful way to yes.
They're a reflection because they're holding up a mirror to us of where we get to go inward and heal. How would we know without the pain and the suffering? You wouldn't.
Yes. Amen. Yes. That to me is also probably one of the more profound lessons when, and this is, like I said, I've also gone through the same thing. It's hard to, it's really hard to almost acknowledge that, because there's so much almost victimhood that we hold on to, like, oh my gosh, this person is destroying me, like this, they are
Yeah.
hurting me.
Mhm.
And when you start to kind of elevate to that level, then it almost becomes, I would say it's like the worst message and the best message, because it's
Yeah.
so painful to hear it and like really take that in as a mirror. You're like, how could this possibly be a mirror? But thank you for that clarification too, of like, it doesn't mean that you are like them, but it's
No.
this mirror to a wound there. Oof, so good, so good.
Yeah. And
Oof.
they may be hurting you also at the most basic level. It's like, no, they're actually doing things that cause me pain. So in the presence of this behavior that this person is doing, I experience suffering. Is really
Mm,
what it is. And I say it that way for a reason, because if you notice, the language starts to be about me.
mm,
I experience suffering. When I, perceive that somebody, or not perceive, but when I have the experience of X, I,
mhm,
Tara, experience suffering. Really,
mhm,
that's all that matters, and I'm so glad that I was so excited about this conversation, to be honest, and especially that I was having it with you, because I knew we
mhm,
could really go there, right? So
mhm,
at at, one of the things that happens in these spaces, and I was in them for years until I was like, I don't want to be in this space, and I need to kind of make my own space, which I did for a few years as well, before, again, levels and layers, saying, this
mhm,
doesn't necessarily feel resonant for me anymore, even in its language. But in those years where I was in the spaces, one thing I couldn't help but notice is the density of not just the experiences that people were having, because of course you're suffering. That's why you're there. You need help. You
mhm.
feel trapped. You don't know what to do. It's anguish. I mean, it's literally hell. It's
It,
absolute hell.
it's soul sucking hell. Absolutely, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And though there's that other layer of, okay, but how are we oriented to the experience? And a lot of what's happening in those spaces, it's like, it's one thing, I'm in pain and I'm suffering, but with an intention, a clear intention of, I'm going this way. In a lot of those spaces, that doesn't exist. And there's also no one really moderating. And it's actually a bond to the trauma. The language, I
Mm,
mean, you guys, honestly, if you're in any of the, one thing I will say, and I don't tell people what to do, but if you use this phrase, or you're around people to use it, I would honestly just drop a little tip in here to stop it. This
mhm,
phrase I hear lots, like, my narcissist. Don't own that. Don't make that your
mm,
identity.
that's a beautiful one. Yeah. Oof. Because it's very it's hard, I think, especially when there's like a romantic bond there. That's where you're like this kind of attachment that you keep going back to it, and you almost like, there's almost like this like addiction to it, that kind of is like, you leave it because it's toxic, but then it's like this going back. And
Yeah.
and
Well, you are
it's
addicted.
it
Yeah.
is an addiction, right? It's like wild to experience and have this, there's this so much rationalization that kind of goes on, that's trying to make yourself feel like you're not crazy.
Well, it's an addiction, right? And what happens
Yeah.
in an addiction? I mean, it's a neuroses of sorts. But I'm
Yes.
so happy you said that word, addiction, or feeling addicted, because your physiology is, in fact, in a state of addiction, which
Hmm.
is, can I speak to that real quick before we go?
Please, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is so important, because what happens is that, and I know because I've been there numerous times,
Yes.
where it's like,
Hmm.
well, it feels so bad that you actually can start telling yourself a story that it can't it can't be right to leave, because nothing should feel like this. But that's like an alcoholic saying, or a heroin, as somebody who's addicted to heroin, saying, I shouldn't stop using heroin because it's so painful, this withdrawal. It's the
Hmm.
same thing. It's no different. And
Hmm.
you would look at that person like, well,
Yes.
that doesn't actually make any sense. It's like, yes, it's painful. Yes, you might need detox. Yes, you might need medical treatment. Yes, you might need a lot of support and a whole new lifestyle, but you wouldn't be like, well, you should probably just keep doing the heroin because, you know, this is really hard for you. So I get it. Like, but we do that with
Exactly.
the relational stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so curious. We have this cute little tool here that we want to know from you. If you type in the chat, what is one thing you want to learn or take away from today? We would love to hear from you. We're going to do a quick little word bubble thing just to hear a word. Maybe it's peace, maybe it's clarity, maybe it's awareness. We'd love to have you type in the chat a quick little thing. We'll give you 10 seconds to do so because it's really fun to just see what words we're looking for from this conversation. I know some of you might have been kind of out of those types of relationships on the other side and maybe looking for deeper healing so that you don't go back to something like that. I know that was a fear for me. Even with dating, I was like, I never wanted to almost date because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust what I would attract next because of what I'd been through. So let's just do this quick little thing. I think this does it. There we go. Ooh, uncertainty.
Oh, I
So I'm
missed my
thinking someone wants.
opportunity.
Oh shoot, yeah. And I sorry guys.
I would say freedom. I would say freedom.
Freedom's a good one, yes. So with that being said, can you explain then what we can look at from an energetic attachment to consider about ourselves so that we can sort of heal that really core wound, or like look at what we can do so that we can, well, we'll talk about better managing those relationships because some people have co-parenting situations that they're not getting out of. But what can we consider about ourselves now that we are looking at this from a mirror perspective?
Yeah.
You know, now what's the next steps?
I mean, that's really the like 80% of the work, right? It's that, it's the real substance of the work. So there's a lot of pieces to that. But, you know, I would say the most essential thing is to really understand what it is that the terror that it brings up in you and link it back, because what that whole relationship dynamic is essentially, you know, somebody who is service to self and somebody who is service to other, but not in a healthy way, right? So and depending, and the reason that this is actually quite layered is that depending on your specific childhood wounds, and you may not even think of them as wounds. I know there's people who are like, but nothing really happened. Well, fine, but you still have imprints, you know, even if, you know, it wasn't you didn't have like an outright abusive childhood, things happened because life makes things happen. You know, it's just by virtue of existing. So, and of course too, there's just the nature of the person. Like every single soul is so unique, you guys. So like, do your best not to look left and right at like in this comparison thing. It doesn't really serve you when it comes to this. So the energetics and the attachment, what is it that brings up the terror in you in relationship to the narcissist? And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean about that. They are these individuals because of their own traumas and wounds. And nope, you do not get to use that as a reason to have empathy. Don't have that false empathy for the narcissist. That is a trap. That is a trap. Okay. That's a trap of like the wounded, you know, looks like the wounded innocent little puppy in the street that's actually going to hurt you and harm you, right? When you get close and like put your hand in the cage to help them and they bite it off. Don't do that. Okay. As I am telling you what to do. Don't do that. So, okay. And it's very specific, right? So if you have the experience, if your terror or your fear, if terror feels too strong, is of being left, that's what they will threaten you with. So that's the piece that you want to look at. If you have a terror of being, you know, overly enmeshed, if you didn't have any space growing up or any sense of, you know, privacy or freedom, that'll be the tactic they use. And if you have a fear of, if your wound is around feeling overly responsible, which most people in these dynamics do, this is a really big one. And the reason it's so big, the abandonment piece, a lot of people with that as their primary wound, it activates so much terror that you essentially become frozen, right? Because what happens is the minute you begin to be like, I actually think I can't take this anymore, they will just, it's like letting go of I don't even know, it's like the air comes out of the balloon. They just completely drop their energy goes so far away from you that it's almost like they, and it's you know, it's what they call discard in
Mm.
the world of narcissism, but essentially
Mhm.
it's designed to make you feel crazy. And so that'll be like a terror response. Other people, what I'd started to say is that other people that have this like hyper responsibility, what that person will activate in you is shame. And this is
Mm.
how they'll do it. And so I'm saying this because this is what you want to look at depending on what actually happened or happened if you're out. What actually happened in my relationship with this person that made it so horrific? What that dynamic will do is basically when you like, they'll be horrible, right? Doing all the things, and you've probably, you know, 113 times like threatened to leave or left or, you know, whatever else. And what they do to essentially bait you is play on the shame by telling you how much they need you. And
Mm.
that really is coming from, yeah, I know, I feel that in my bones too. That's coming from a person who you, if that's you as a child, you were most likely, you had a lot put on you. Either like physically a lot put on you, like you had to do a lot of actual things in the house because there was no parent, or maybe the parent was an alcoholic or using drugs or just absent, or, you know, God knows what, involved in gangs, violence, whatever. So you literally were doing a lot. Or if it wasn't that, you might have psychologically and emotionally been doing way more than your share as a child. And so you have this, you have a narrative, you have an imprint. It doesn't, no one ever had to have actually said this to you, but the internal imprint says, I am responsible for everyone, basically. I'm responsible for how other people feel.
Mm.
And it's a
And
wound.
oof, this is beautiful. And I think there's a lot of women that would relate to the word empaths, right? They're like, I'm an empath. So, and there is this sort of like dynamic that I see in a lot of my clients that's very much like, I give everything to everybody else. And these types of dynamics are,
Mm-hmm.
I think, strong attractors for that narcissistic relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So, so then, so now we have this awareness, and then it's sort of like, what I hate to see is when women are like, okay, I have this boss that's a narcissist, or I have and then they're like, okay, I'm leaving the job. I'm leaving the job, and then they go to the next one, and I just think, it's not quite gonna, it's you kind of keep going through that repetitive cycle. For
Yeah.
me, it was almost a decade. It was
Yeah.
a decade of saying, oh my gosh, another addict. Oh gosh, can you believe I attracted another one? Like, poor me, go into another relationship with a completely different character, but
Mm.
same background in whether it be cocaine addiction or whatever, but it was just like different face,
Different
same
scenery,
story.
same situation.
Yeah, and it wasn't somebody said to me, one of my girlfriends said one time, well, at least you're upgrading from like the the thug kind of guy that was like the real bad boy that was actually getting in physical fights to like
For the white
the
collar
to the
narcissist.
white collar, to the, yeah,
The white
exactly.
collar abuser. Yeah,
You kind of, it's fascinating to me. So
it
so
is.
now we have this awareness, and we're understanding that. So now what are some of those, maybe those tools? I know, I mean, obviously there's like the energetic work of I mean, there's a million different things, but how do people start on that journey of really like that inner work that is the real energy shifting stuff that's going to help them get that detachment? So there's that awareness, okay, I have this childhood wound.
Mhm,
Then how do they
mhm.
kind of, what are those next tools for the like the shift so that they
Yeah,
don't go back to that, or they don't keep
right.
attracting it?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So I wouldn't even begin to be able to tell you if I hadn't gone through it. I don't know how people even speak to this topic from like a purely academic
Yeah,
place.
right.
It's
Yeah.
so wildly complex. So,
Hmm.
okay. Now, there's a few things. First, if I may, I'd like to comment on this word empath. So,
Please, yes.
this is one of those things I say that people just decide to completely write me off, and it's fine. But again, pay attention to where the activation is, and also pay attention to the part of you that a part of you, there's a part oftentimes in us when we're in these situations that is actually scanning and looking for a way to make the thing or the person that can actually help us get out wrong, because we don't, it's not that we don't want to leave, it's that we don't know that we don't feel that we can.
Mhm.
So just pay extra attention to that, right? Because you don't have to like everything I say or like me to feel into whether the message resonates at any given point in this conversation, right? So, okay, what I had started to say, the thing about the empath, I used to say that as well. I can't even use that word anymore just because of how hijacked it's been and what it's come to mean. I actually wrote a blog post a few years ago. It's like that empath is just, it's just a word for somebody with bad boundaries. And I was speaking about myself, obviously, it's like, the reason that came through is because it was spirit talking to me about me, and how I was. And so, and to some degree still, being in certain relationships. So it was helping me tease that out. It's like, well, where are you still doing this even a tiny little bit? And I'll even tell you guys in full transparency, a couple of weeks ago, actually, I had this, again, there's layers. Okay. Be where you are. If you're in a relationship that is destroying your soul, then be there, and let's look at it from that lens. The reason I'm sharing what I'm about to share is just to say that the journey is never ending. It's just never ending. It's an infinite journey. There's no perfection under the sun. Anyone who's genuinely and sincerely doing their work has no need, would never make you feel bad for where you are, or even look at you as where you are, so that's not the point of this. But I share this because to really illustrate the point that there are just these infinite levels and layers. It's something as subtle as, and this was what happened to me a couple of weeks ago, where it's like in the split second, microsecond moment, I noticed that I was adding an emoji to a message. I didn't really want to put the emoji there. It wasn't really how I felt. Little red heart emoji. And it just hit me out of nowhere. I'm like, this emoji is incongruent with how I feel. And I was putting it there to soften, but not from an open heart, from like I'm worried about how the other person's going to receive it. Because it's one thing to be like, hey, this is what's happening, even if it's a difficult message to deliver. But sometimes it's like, well, I that isn't up to par. If it's like a team member, it's like, well, here's what I need you to do to make it really up to standard, right? And I still love you and I appreciate you and thank you. And there's a heart because it matches. That was not the case in this moment. So again, I share that just to pay attention to the reason we're doing a thing, which brings me back to empath. That is not empathy. The willingness to sacrifice yourself is not empathy. That is something else. We might call it martyrdom, but regardless of what label you want to put on it, that is a wound.
And it's almost like we think it's almost like a crown we're wearing, like, oh, I'm an empath, or like it's almost like something that you feel like I'm a kind person, versus like
I'm a good person.
Yeah, I'm a good person. Oh, it's so
I'm
good,
a good
because
person
you're like,
because I suffer so much. And that's a big thing in our world, especially for women. That's a huge problem in our world, that it's like, well, how good you are is tied to how much pain you're in. I mean, how completely insane.
Completely insane. And it reminds me of something that came around the time of us even working together, that was a big thing around like financial wounds too, or like this, like I can't afford, and all these things around money. Like, I mean, all these things are so interrelated. It's so beautiful. But I remember a phrase that came to mind, and it's hitting me right now when you said that about the empath. Like, it's just, you don't have boundaries. I'm like, is stop using the fill in the blank. So in this case, we could say the narcissist, as your scapegoat for your own pain.
Oof, yes. That's it.
It's like, true. Oh, that to me, like when you really let that sink in and you really get real with yourself and be like, oh my gosh, this is like you said, this is that mirror of something within me, then it's also that most empowering place where now you can go in and work with the wound, right? Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
And so I love that you brought that in. It is a scapegoat, right? For lack of a better word, but it's also, it's keeping you from your greatness, because it's a form of, let me say this about it, to close the loop on the empath. If you are in any kind of relationship that is unhealthy, and you know if it's unhealthy. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well, because I want to say something about that, because our world is so distorted at the moment that there are people that are not necessarily in unhealthy relationships that are, everything has become toxic. Okay, everything is not toxic. Relationships are also work, and conflict is normal to a degree. I wouldn't say conflict is normal. What people think of as conflict, but isn't really conflict, it's just people needing to get to know each other, has literally been turned into like a diagnosis, which is really, I don't know, if we have a moment, maybe we can come back to that. But just speaking to this, to close the loop on the empath, it's, and this thing about you're not doing it because you're bad. And I want to keep saying that, because it's not like, well, I just want an excuse to not, be like, not, live in my greatness. It's not that straightforward. It's an invitation, like what, you just said, Kristen. It's like the invitation is to, if you can step back a little bit and like zoom out a little bit and look at the reality of the situation and look at it like this. If nothing changes, if I don't make any changes, can this continue to be exactly as it is while I also step into my greatness and live, a truly great life? Can those things happen simultaneously? And you'll see the answer is probably no, right? So that's what we mean by, it's keeping you from your greatness, because you can't stay in something that's making you sick and get well. It's like you can't drink the poison and be like, I don't know why I don't feel good. You don't feel good because it's poison.
Yes. And wasn't this just in your Instagram? I think or something recently about now going back, is now you're drinking the poison that's already with the label.
Yes. I reposted that because it's, and that has actually, it's interesting you bring it up. That's one of my most, I think I had like 995 like saves. I mean, it was like one of the most saved posts ever. And it's because people resonate. They're like, oh, I've done that. Now, think of it like this. So glad you brought that in. It's such a good metaphor. The reason I talk so much at the level of understanding, and we'll talk about a couple of like practical like things you can do to actually get back to the question too. I haven't forgotten it.
No, of course.
Okay, so like the reason this understanding is so important, because the understanding is the thing most people are missing. Here's another one of the things I say that will either, magnetize people in, or they'll just be like, no, she's wrong. I don't like her. And so the thing is that your problem is not that you don't know how. For some of you may be stuck there. The problem for a lot of people in these dynamics is that they haven't made a decision. And you haven't made a decision because you don't actually fully believe what's going on.
Amen. Oh, I've gotten 3 goosies on this conversation so far, which is very typical of our conversations. I love that.
I have them too.
Yeah, because it's just some truths in there, right? So, okay. So now to the energetics, and then we'll have our last question. If anybody has any specific questions, please type them in the chat. But I feel like this really is covering so much, and as we dive into a few now tools, I think then it's kind of like, hey, now what? Because I sat there in like the awareness for a long time and was like, and then, well, I mean, one of the ones I think was my biggest starting point was actually, it sounds weird, but well, you might not think it was, is to stop talking about it.
Huge.
It was like, because I would just and I was like, wow, I've been saying the same story. It was about the 10-year mark when I started to hit me like, it's been 10 years. Like there was a part of me, like a higher self voice, something in there that was just like, are you done? Are you done? But then even still, I felt like it was challenging then I was like, hey, I want once, but like you said, I like the word decision, because once I decided, it's almost like the people, the resources, the things start to show up that are going to help you through that.
And they will. That's 100% right, because you can't fake the universe. You can't trick the universe. It's like, once I was literally on my knees, like nothing in this reality made sense, right? And at that point, it's like, that's when the grace comes in. And it's not the same as just being like, oh, but I'm suffering so much. You are suffering, but being in really deep suffering and actually being willing to see things differently are not the same thing. And so that story is so key, because the more you tell that story, you actually are bonding yourself to that. You're making it a part of your identity. Okay. So definitely, and actually, if you're in the dynamic and you're not ready to leave, or you're just not quite there yet, the thing, because it's intense, right? And I know it brings up a lot of things for a lot of people, but what you can do is just start noticing the addiction to the story. Forget the addiction to the actual person. Just notice how hard it is not to say the thing. So not saying the thing is like not having the drink. Just notice that, and be willing to stop telling the story, or at least to stop telling it that way, or to people who want to bond over your trauma and your pain. The more you bond over that, I mean, two things happen, right? Eventually you exhaust yourself, but that could be years. That could be a whole lifetime.
It could be, absolutely. I've seen it for women and for decades. And yeah, I'm just blessed that I had someone stop me in my tracks one time. And I was telling the story for the probably millionth time. And I just met this person in Bali, actually. It was one of my first weeks in Bali. And she just looked at me and she didn't attack. She just looked at me and she just said, interesting story.
I remember you told me about that.
And it kind of stopped me in my tracks, because I'm like, what? I'm not getting this like, oh my gosh, you poor thing, what have you been through response. And it kind of was empowering in a way.
And also it didn't feed the addiction, because and that's the issue I have with these spaces. It's like, well, if you go into a space and you get so much compassion and empathy from other people who are struggling just as bad, if not worse, right? So that becomes addictive. But think about it. That's just like, it's like a hit of crack. It's not helpful. It's just a temporary Band-Aid. You don't need those people's you really just need your own compassion at the end of the day, but you don't need that. That's not even actually compassion. That's just, see what happens in that whole situation. It's actually you're feeding their trauma. So it's just like a feeding of trauma festival. That's all that's happening.
Oh, that's
facing well. Yes. Right? So stop it. Don't do that. So I would say noticing the addiction to the story, and actually writing, like, let the trigger be that I want to talk about how the last thing that happened, or what he did, or I can't believe what she said, or whatever the thing is. You guys, here's the real hack. Here's the real hack. You have to be able and willing to sit in the fire of hell and not do anything. And here's the reason you have to be able to do that. Because all that's really happening in life is that we're having an experience in our body that feels too big for our body to hold. That's it. And the only requirement actually is to feel it. And we are so terrified. I might just do a whole course on like how to actually feel your feelings.
Yeah.
We are so terrified. And we don't have any examples, so it's not really our fault, because our world is so neurotic. What if I just allowed myself to sit in this terror without doing anything? Because you think you're going to die. Absolutely. And the issue is that you never let yourself sit in it. Every single thing that has ever been scanned in needs to be scanned out, which requires, and it doesn't take as long. So it's like, if you're like, I've been scanning things in, things being the traumas and the ruptures for the last, 55 years, it does not take anything close to that long to scan them out. And by scan them out, I mean to feel, but it's intense. It's intense, but it must be felt. It must be felt. It's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands of hours of therapy. And I say this all the time to people. It's like, if you want my one thing, my one takeaway that would have made all that money worth it. And luckily for me, I had a brilliant clinician, and he said this to me repeatedly for years. Your feelings will always be expressed. Your feelings will always be expressed. Your feelings will always be expressed. You don't have a choice about that. The choice you do have is how. The things we don't express get expressed when you're, throwing things across the room, or yelling, or contacting the person they had the affair with. All this neuroses is because
of posting on your Facebook about it.
posting on more trauma bonding with yours. And I get it, you guys. It's not a judgment. It's
As
like,
do I.
it's desperation. It's like, but notice what's actually happening. Trauma is by definition something that essentially it takes your breath away, right? It's the nervous system is like goes offline, or so it seems. And it does do that. But the misunderstanding is that, oh my goodness, like, and sometimes we do need help and support, but you have way more ability to sit with pain than you think. Way more ability. And my issue with a lot of the teachers in the spaces, and even a lot of these like gurus, because when I really listen to them and feel into them, I'm like, they're all the whole conversation is about the other person. This is important to say, because it's kind of a tool. Your situation with the narcissist has nothing to do with the narcissist. And when you actually understand this, you realize that this pedestal of power that they were on had nothing to do with them. They're just an actor in your universe, literally to help you see yourself more clearly. Has nothing to do with them. And I trust, pray, and believe that you will come to recognize that one day. Now, that being said,
this is why
do you want to interrupt? Do you want to pause? Should I pause?
Nope. Keep going. This is
so
magic.
Definitely the story is a big thing, right? And then the other thing I would do, if you like a really helpful tool, and honestly, the people that do this, I have never had a single client do this and not end up successfully leaving the relationship and getting better, ever. And the thing is that you need to start writing things down, specifically this, because one of the reasons you can't move on is because your system is in a state of continual overdrive, and you don't actually know what's happening you are not really in your own body or in your own reality or in your own life. And I know it's hard to get there. And so the thing that will get you there is writing down the interactions you have with this person. Because I'm assuming a lot of people here, like, or I don't know for sure, but if you have them, or if you're still in it, this is the thing. Now, and here's what I mean by in it. Any contact means you're in it, okay? Any contact means you're in it. Leaving the person and still staying in touch with them, you haven't left. They don't need you to live under the same roof as them to keep abusing you, just to be clear, and to keep siphoning your consciousness. So, okay, back to the tool. Every interaction, and you guys, I did this. I think it took me a few weeks from the time I started doing this. Granted, it had already been years of pain, but I just want to say that your willingness to actually write down, I make a commitment to myself, even if I think it's stupid, every encounter I have with this human, I am going to write down the following. You guys ready? Here's what you're going to write down. You're going to write down, this is like my process for so many things. You're going to write down, what is the sensation in my body? And by sensation, what we mean is, and anyone who's ever worked with me or works with me closely knows this process inside out, but it's very important, because if you don't get really intimate with your own triggers, you cannot heal. Only you can do it. I can't do it for you. Kristen can't do it for you. It's like asking somebody to breathe for you, but I can tell you what to do. Okay. Sensation in the body, warmth, chills, tightness. These are sensations. Look up sensations. It's okay if you don't really know. Like, I don't really know what the sensation is. Fine. Look it up. Heat. Okay. Then the second piece is where. Okay. I feel a heat in my stomach, in my solar plexus, I feel goosebumps on my neck. Sometimes when we have fear, it's like, you can become quite paranoid when you're in these dynamics. I mean, I remember literally really splitting from reality. I know this today is not about my story, but it is to the point that, you can literally find yourself literally almost looking over your shoulder. So the sensations matter. You can come back to that way later. For now, you're just writing it down. So, tingles on the back of my neck. Okay. So the sensation, where it is in your body, and then you want to write down the feeling. Okay. The feeling is, you look up feeling words, like just do a little Google search, feeling words, and whatever you identify with. It can be multiple ones, but try to, if you're really just literally this all is brand new to you, it doesn't matter. Just write down any and all things that resonate.
There's a really good feeling wheel that you can look up that will kind of guide you through. Yeah. And it's good to get more specific than just sad or angry. Like there's like embarrassment. Like I felt so much embarrassment. Like I was like,
Humility.
humility? Yeah,
Yes, a big
humiliated.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew. And so
Mhm.
those are all connected, right? Our sensations and the areas in our body and those feelings. Now, the other thing to do, there's two more pieces to this that are really, really, really important. You have to do it for every interaction. You want to write down, you should probably actually bump this up to the first step, Kristen, if you don't mind. I gave it out of order. Sorry. Thank you
That's
so
okay.
much. So the first thing actually, and this is so important, you guys, actually, if you do nothing else, do this. This is like, can we just star, highlight, gold, bold, italicize this one? Write
Yes.
down what happened.
Mhm.
What was the
Mhm.
interaction?
Mhm.
And there's a few reasons for that. You have to start tracking your interactions with this person. I don't care if it was 3 seconds of like handing a child over. What happened? And then what was the sensation in my body? Where did I feel it? And what was the feeling? And when you write down what happened, you want to write down like objectively what happened. And for a lot of reasons. One, because you won't remember. Two, because when you're dealing with this kind of person, you don't remember correctly, and because they don't want you to remember correctly. And your system is
Mhm.
so overloaded that the whole defining feature of being in this kind of dynamic is like, I often say to people that at the end of one, I even have chills in this moment talking about it still. At the end of one of those relationship dynamics, and it was with somebody I lived with, which made it extra horrifying, and was quite interdependent for a lot of reasons, in a city nobody I knew, et cetera, et cetera. I literally tell people at that point, at my lowest point, if this person had told me that my name's not really Tara, I might have believed them.
Mhm.
I was that disconnected from reality. And it really does break my heart for me then even saying that, because it sounds so extreme to somebody who doesn't understand
Mhm.
what that even is or what that means. So they distort your reality. If you don't have things written down, you can't make progress. It's like you're just underwater. So writing down the interaction is really important, because you won't remember and they will make sure you don't remember correctly. But when you
Mhm.
have it there in writing, if you're living with this person, by the way, this is not something that they should ever be able to find or access. Like, be mindful, of
Mhm.
doing it on a laptop, because, that's the thing. Like, just, things I feel like I have to say sometimes, depending on where somebody is in their current experience. And also, because the other reason to write it down is because you will be horrified at your own reality when you look at it.
Mhm.
But if you don't write it down, you won't be, because your whole system is wired for you to work it out.
And it almost becomes like just Groundhog Day, and you
It
don't
is
even
Groundhog Day.
realize you're in Groundhog Day for blinking 10 years go by, and you're like, wow, I just spent 10 years in this like effed up world.
100%. And that's actually really good, like metaphor, because what happens is that we're living in survival mode. And so when
Mhm.
you're in survival, time becomes very tricky and very like compartmentalized and broken up, whereas it's not really like that, right? But
Mhm.
so you're in survival mode, so it's the ability to connect dots and step back and see that there's something that's been woven here, that if you have, here's the thing, the reason the Groundhog's Day is a problem, this is a better way to say it, is that
Mhm.
you can't see the totality of your reality. Your system
Amen.
can't see it. And so the only real hack I've ever been able to find to the fact that your system is in a malfunctioning state. It's okay, no shame, no judgment, but it's like, can I recognize that my system isn't operating correctly? Because normally we can weave things together if we're relatively here and present and not in danger and not in fear. It's the fear
Mhm.
that really matters, right? You can't do that. Your system, that program is like down. So you have to write it down. It's like somebody using a crutch because their leg is broken. You have to do it so
Mhm.
that you can heal, So write it down. Don't let your brain trick you into thinking that you don't have to write it down. And then, if you can go to that next step, but again, I want to emphasize that a part of you will probably feel overwhelmed and just be like, I don't know, too many steps, too much work. I don't have time. All you have to do is write down the interaction,
Mhm.
even if you don't do any of the other things, just because if you just write down the interaction, I walked in, this is, they, didn't say hi, and then they said these, horrible words to me, asked me what I was doing here through their phone. That's enough. Okay, great. That interaction noted, journaled, like the data has been recorded. And a lot of times we're having so many of these, then it's like, oh, well, 5 minutes later, 5 hours later, 3 days later, next interaction, text message. The text message said this. Just write it down. No, you can't go back to your phone as a record. You won't do it. You need all the information in one place so that you can start to really see your reality correctly.
Yeah, when it's kind of there in black and white in front of you, like this is your story right now.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would say, if to whatever degree possible, spend less time with this person and around this person, even if you think, oh, well, we're not even speaking, or we're just, you are speaking, you are affected by the proximity you have to them. And actually what you're really affected by is by their access to you, which I know it's a whole thing with the co-parenting conversation. Unfortunately, it's more complex, and it's very, very nuanced because it depends so much on the specifics of that person's situation. But honestly, you guys, for anyone that doesn't have that, you don't have any reason to not separate. Well, yes, you do. It's really hard. I know that, and it's really painful, but you're in a different domain ultimately. And it's funny because I know there are people when they're in the throes of that abuse who almost actually wish that they did have that bond of like that's how deep the trauma runs. You're like, well, at least if we had that, then they would have, and you think they would be better. They won't be. People will actually have children with these people will tell you it is not a joke. Not a joke.
Absolutely. Which is somewhat that leads into our final question too, so it's one thing to like leave a relationship, but then there's this co-parenting or this ongoing connection that people deal with this kind of ongoingly. And what I get that it's probably like so complex. But how are they supposed to like find those boundaries and like that even that communication? I'm thinking of a friend right now who couldn't make this call because they're currently in court with their ex partner. And I know that, and this is a man with a female, and I know he struggles a lot with like, I don't know how to even like communicate to her. Like the communication of even just logistical things just feels like overwhelming.
Okay, so I'm going to say something, probably the most heavy-handed thing I've said so far.
Yeah, bring it.
You need boundaries until you have self-worth, and then you don't need boundaries anymore or standards. You really need to work on that. And that is such a thing because my goodness, that realization that I don't actually care about myself is so painful. I know I was there, and it was honestly not that many years ago. I was already well into this work and helping people and doing all the things, but there was still something. And when I say horrifying, it's such an understatement. You do not need any strategy really when you have self-love. It is the strategy.
Okay. That's it.
So it's like, well, how do you get that? Well, that's a process, and we could have another conversation about that sometimes. But the way that you begin to move in that direction is be willing to accept where you are, and be willing to accept that there is going to be pain involved no matter what. You're already in pain, but it's like, I would rather hurt with intention. And it hurts so bad, and the terror is so great. But again, you need to realize that the thing you are most afraid of has already happened. It's all already here. All your worst nightmares and terrors and fears have already happened. It's just a misunderstanding, and it's a very painful one, but you are in this situation because you are meant to overcome it. There's no other way. It's like this, it's almost like trying to resist, I don't eat eggs, so I don't love this analogy, but it's like once like something delicate has been cracked and you're like, but no, I want it. It is meant to crack open. You are meant to crack open. And a lot of the pain that we experience is actually because we're resisting we're resisting the break, but guess what? The break's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Just like fall on the sword? Yes.
Yes.
I do, because you get there faster. And if you can't, it's also okay. But that moving in that direction of self-worth, acknowledging and accepting that you are meant to be uncomfortable. It's like when somebody's trying to kick heroin, it would be ludicrous for me to tell them, just worry about, as long as you feel good, as long as things feel aligned. Nothing is going to feel aligned at all. Why? Because I've gone so far off path. Mm-hmm. I've gone so far in the direction of self-betrayal. Actually, nothing I even thought was real is real. Okay, well, mm-hmm. things have to be corrected for. I'm going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to be uncomfortable more intensely, probably in the short run. It's going to be more acute, but guess what? That uncomfortable, that pain has light at the end of the tunnel. There's actually a way through. This pain you're just going to be in forever, and it's probably going to get worse. Okay, so there's that. The second thing is that with that self-love, because I know it feels like a very elusive thing to people, but it really isn't, right? It's like, am I doing what a person with self-worth would do? Really, am I actually doing what I would tell somebody else to do? And that gap, like how big that gap is the gap in our self-worth. Mm-hmm. And so we need to start closing it through the very difficult work of actually doing what a person who cares about themselves, I was about to swear, would do. What would they do? What would she do? Well, she wouldn't even be in this situation. Yeah, okay, I get that. But if she were, what would she do?
Mm-hmm. This comes down to like the same thing around exercise, eating healthy. Like, this is why I love this. This is like this perfect little segue tie into all of this message, because some people are like, why are you talking about narcissism, Christine? And I'm like, because you're a chef. and I'm sitting here like, I have been working with women and their healing and their health for over a decade and been in the world for 18 years myself. And I was like, it's the same thing. Like you said, like, even when I think about a juice cleanse, it's this discomfort of going through refraining from eating for 10 days to go through the discomfort and the feeling and the ick and the bringing up the emotions. It's also an incredible tool to allow those emotions to come out. But on the other side is like this beautiful light. Yeah. And it's like this short-term discomfort for this infinite connection that I just feel like is such a profound message for people to understand, even when it comes to our health choices, right? A lot of people think, how could I ever stop eating sugar? That's something that I never thought would be possible, until I just thought, how could I ever not eat wine gums? Like, that's just what I do. I just eat wine gums. And
like
it's kind of who I am. And you can't fathom the concept of even alcohol too. It was like drinking a 6-pack of beer a day was just normal for me. And until I went through the discomfort of restricting those substances for some time to get your body recalibrated to its truth. And so the physical, the emotional, the mental, all these things interconnected, the beautifulness of like all the depths of, and I think it really does come back to that feeling the feelings, feeling them fully. Like, I love feeling them fully. I love that there's some women on this chat that I know have come on a retreat too with the breath work and the juicing. And I have watched them go through that, 20 years of not feeling, or that's the way I like to think of it. It's like, feels like 20 years just felt in a matter of a few hours in some of these sessions, right? That are so profound, and you leave like a squeegee just went through your soul, and you're able to move forwards in this greater light. Most people don't probably look at you too, and they see you in the light, and they don't realize what hell you've been through in your life.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's easy to perceive things incorrectly. And I was sharing that in a group the other day. I'm like, it's actually really interesting. It's like, I don't really think to talk about it anymore. And I was sharing that with my sister, actually. I was like, gosh, I'm like, maybe I should mention something about like the years of like drinking and drugging and, ER visits and overdoses and all the horror, of life, and of that, just that anguish, that just deepest anguish ever, where you're like, there's something wrong with me. And that is the refrain, that we have. Actually, a lot of people have it, whether in these dynamics or not, but also, it's another layer of conversation. But most of our world is it's problematic. Most people are in pain of some sort, whether somebody has like full-blown narcissism or not. It doesn't really matter. It's just like, are you good? Are you happy? Are you cared for? Is your heart cared for? And honestly, nobody can care for your heart if you don't care for your heart. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing under the sun. It is a reflection. And that's why the invitation is always to go inward. And the thing about I was going to say about the retreat real quick. It is such a beautiful thing, because sometimes that we can move more quickly if we feel held. And honestly, sometimes it's just a matter of having another human there, because it's so scary. It's so scary. It's like, I really feel like it's akin to probably dying, where you're like, I just don't want to be alone in this death.
Amen. Yes. Oh, that's such a beautiful thing. And I would attest, a big relationship shift for me was a 3-day window with you, when you were just messaging me through something that I probably would have stayed in for 2 years. And it was a 3-day window of just, I could cry, because it's like, you're in it. And I just was like, and just having that person that's there to say, like, kind of like, this is it, you're doing it, kind of that encouragement to get you through that. It's like your timeline in life just drops into your new self. And I just want to encourage everybody here, because I know everybody's in different reasons, seasons, lifetimes of what you're experiencing, but life is meant to be beautiful as well as all the other things. And it's like, the deeper your awareness, it's like life gets to be a whole lot more fun. And even though, like you said, then work is never done, that's a beautiful message, I think, that needs to be restated all the time, because some people think it's almost like, you think that it's like this other side is now it's all bells and whistles, but there's an element of truth to that. There is some magic there, and deeper awarenesses. And you might go through these same things, but it's just like this new awareness that is like, that's the gift. Like you said, like, this person was your gift to this really deep awareness and empowerment in yourself, love, a rising. That's why I like to think of it as like this rising within yourself. That's just like, wow, like, I wouldn't be doing this type of work if it weren't for those relationships that I went through, and my own rising, and my own like depression to have to go to this center where I end up juicing. Like, who the heck juices, now all of a sudden we're guiding juice feasting. Like, what a beautiful rising. So I think we're all meant to rise through these things. So I just want to remind everybody to
Can I just say one final thing about that? I know I keep asking for one final thing, but like, really one final thing. So it's like,
this is beautiful.
You are already that. And actually, even though, again, levels and layers, on the one hand, it's like, I share the subtle thing with the emoji. Okay, that's just a subtle thing, and I move through it in about 3 seconds. That is a very different reality to the one I had. I literally sometimes don't even believe that this is the same lifetime. It's hard for me to believe it. Like, it actually,
you feel like a different human.
Like, it actually brings tears to my eyes, because it feels so impossible to go from that to that. And I say that because I just have this like, this like kind of like almost like message come through, that whatever the thing is that plays for you over and over, whether doesn't have to be, it might be romantic, but it's like, typically it's like, might have been mom, might have been dad, might have been stepmom, stepdad, grandparent, a teacher, a bad experience, whatever the thing is that you feel like cut you so deep, and it's just, you hear it. It's like that anguish, that pain that comes up, whatever the thing is that was said to you or done to you. I really want people to understand this, because when we say reflection, like, it applies at all times and in all ways. Those things that were said to you, that person was saying it to themselves. They were just saying it in your direction, Those words were not meant for you. They don't belong to you. They have nothing to do with you at all. People are talking to themselves, the mean dad or the abusive mom. It's like, all those things, they're all projections of their own suffering and pain. But you don't know, you can't understand that as a child. You may not even understand it yet as an adult, but eventually you will. It's like people are literally talking in a mirror. That's all
Mm,
that's happening. So when there's cruelty, it's because there is self-hatred.
yes.
People that love
Oof.
themselves are not mean to other people, but they're not fake nice either. Okay. So
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a whole, yeah, there's so many conversations I feel like we need to
anyways,
have, like we could do like
yeah,
a weekly segment with you.
to do that.
This
Yeah.
is so incredible.
Thank
And
you.
as a final note, I'm curious if you have, obviously we'll be sharing your website and your Instagram, and we would love to hear just if there's anything that you want to direct people to stay connected to you, or those kind of the places.
Yeah, just social would be amazing to connect. I don't, I'm not doing any things at the moment.
Hmm.
I have an amazing, like, active container of women that I'm seeing through a 6-month journey. I don't have any active like selling or programs or anything right now, but they may come again in the future at some point.
Yes.
My primary, and yeah, there may be, there will be something at some point, but my primary position or place in life at this moment, at this point in time, it's really to give what's been given to me, because so much has been given to me.
And just looking at Tara's Instagram, her social media every day is like this little soul upliftment, and so I love it. It's like I'm just like, oh, I'm always posting little like mind blows and like just truth bombs, just such. I love that there's no, like you say, there's no like sugar coating or like this trying to appease everybody. It's just like just straight truths, and cuts through the bullshit. That's the way I like to see it,
Too much bullshit in the world.
which we all need. We have to really assess our own bullshit, is a lot of times what we need as humans, and that's really a deep part of love too, is just like really
Yeah.
cutting through your stuff, your limits, which you don't have any. And yeah, so many different conversations to be
Mm-hmm.
had. So what we want to do for everybody, we always like to get your health goals. We do have a final offer sheet that just in case you want to stay connected, because some of you might be new here, you haven't submitted, we have a little button there that you can see, click here. And because we do help people obviously with their health goals and their achieving their greater health, and we do guide some things around breath work and juice feasting and eating better. And we're definitely want to keep you connected to Tara as well as we go along. And so make sure you complete that for us, and we'll be sending you out some information to stay connected to Tara, and maybe she'll be doing something more publicly available to the masses again, and just to help you on your journey to living your best lives. That's really what this is about. So thank you all so much for joining us. I think we just crushed it. I feel like the wisdom just kept pouring through. I was just like, oh, I just loved it so much. So thank you so much. You all can give the little round of applause for Tara. I think there's a little button you can push for your little applause button.
So cute. Thank
Isn't
you
that
for
cute?
having me on. It's super fun. And I did not come on for this, and we didn't even touch on it, nor do I have anything to do with this work that you do, but I do my own, I do fasting and cleansing, and we know that we share that love for the cleansing and the physical detoxification. So it would be like advanced level, work. Really, it'll get you there faster. I'm a huge proponent of the physical purification, because your emotions are totally tied to your ability to even let go of weight, actually.
Exactly. And that was kind of the premise here too, because I started, as someone who's helping people lose weight, it was like, okay, here's the recipes, here's the food. And then it was like, why isn't that happening?
Right.
I just had a client that actually worked with me for years ago for months and months, and we were doing recipe work, and she was going to yoga every day. She did all this stuff, and it was like 8 weeks and didn't even lose a pound. And I was like, this doesn't seem right. And then years later, she reconnects, and now I have my own newfound wisdom, and found out it was like all this stress around financial, like there was a huge thing that happened with a father that passed away, and all this money that went to somebody else, and all these things that it was so much burden on her soul that I was like, there's the weight.
That's it.
There's the weight.
Yep.
She was like gambling problems, things like that I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. This isn't the food. That's why I say it's like food is a piece of the equation, but the emotional healing is really everything.
Yeah, it's trapped in your cells, and there's energetic blockage, especially if you have people pleasing and like a closing of the throat is not open. I mean, there's so many layers we could go into, but yeah, cleanse, do all the things. I had a mentor once say to me, she's like, everything works, just do whatever you feel most inclined to do, but do it fully. Just do it fully.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I love it so much. Amazing. Okay, my darling. Well, thank you so much. We'll let you all go and have a beautiful day today. I'm so excited for those of you that joined us live. And thank you so much. We'll be posting this to our YouTube channel so you can all watch and take some friends that might need to see this when it comes out. We'll be sending it out via email too. So love you so much.
Thank you all.